Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. It's of course Friday, which means it's the weekly challenge refresh day, and this time around we do have something a little bit special, especially if you're a fan of real world motorsport. Over the last few months we've seen the introduction of the JGTC Championship, and this time around it's the turn of DTM. Yes, you heard that right, we finally have a DTM themed special event. With DTM arriving with a special event, this still gives me hope that one day we may just see the legendary Opel Calibra DTM car finally return in Gran Turismo 7. Before we get into the video though, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss an upload from the channel. Here we go then, October week 1. This will end on the 10th of October 2024 at midnight. As you can see in terms of the events, first up, we have the European Clubman Cup 600 at Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. We then move over to the Schwarzwald League at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. That is a one-lap sprint around the Nordschleife with varying weather. We then head over to Italy and Monza for the Hypercar Parade before moving over to Circuit de St. Croix A layout for one of the new update 1.52 events, the Nissan GTR Cup. And finally, we have the brand new special event, the DTM special over at Nürburgring Sprint, which is going to be very much like the JGTC event for a 10-lap race with a mix of both road cars and race cars. In terms of the rewards this week, who really cares? For one event it's 100k, 3 events it's 200k, and for all 5 events it's going to be 500k. So at least you can bag yourself some credits through this pretty decent week overall. So let's get straight into it then with the European Clubman Cup 600 for event number 1 this week. Of course aimed at European vehicles up to a 600 pp recommendation. And as always when it comes to all these events, I'll run them on the hardest difficulty and stick as close as possible to any recommendation or pp limit. My car of choice for this one was the Alfa Romeo 4C Group 3 road car, something a little bit different this time around. Now in terms of the event itself, it's actually one of the easier Clubman Cup events. Now you'll probably know that some of the post-launch ones have been some of the most toughest little sprint races in the entirety of GT7. We have the likes of the Giulia running around and some really quick cars in the post-launch events. However, this is one of the early events to the game, and overall it's set out much easier this time around. One of the big things is the fact that the AI cars is limited to only 11, 12 cars in total including yourself. It's on a relatively small track overall, over 3 laps, so it's not a very long event at all. And the majority of the AI throughout this race are pretty slow in comparison to what we see in the latter events. A lot of these cars on the grid will be the back markers for some of the post-launch event. The only actual exception is 2 of the vehicles, that being the Lamborghini Countach, which is extremely unsteady around here and just cannot put the, all that pace to use, and of course the Mercedes-Benz, which we do typically see always out in front, and that's going to be the lead car for this event. So bear that in mind, that car, especially around the likes of Brands Hatch, is quite bulky and quite big. I ended up following it around for around about half a lap before an opening came onto the beginning of lap 3 to finally get the jump and move myself into first place. When it comes to Brands Hatch itself, it's definitely not the most open layout. It can really tighten up at times, so just be aware that you'll probably need to pick your passes, especially as you get towards the front of the grid with the likes of the Countach and the Mercedes-Benz. However, you should get this one done and dusted with relative ease. Of course, this being the starter event for this week. That's tick number 1, 37,500 credits with that clean race bonus. Really not paying out too much with this one. But of course, for that one event tick, we're going to be awarded with 100k on top. Not too bad overall. Moving on to event number 2 for this week, this is the Schwarzwald League over at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. In terms of the event itself, it is limited to 700 pp and does feature randomized varying weather. More than likely it will rain during your 1-lap sprint around here, so just be prepared. My car of choice was the M3 from 1997 or the E36. This is my 700 pp grinding car. So in terms of the event itself, I actually limited the car to about 650 pp. unlucky, and that is because I actually started on the intermediates and just prayed for when the rain came in. And I did get pretty lucky with this run that the rain did come in very, very early. A lot of the time it won't come in until the end sections, and then you'll get really heavy rain, and in fact the rain didn't hold out for very long, but did wet the track enough that it went into intermediate conditions for the majority of the event itself. I wouldn't recommend doing anything on inters, especially if you don't get the rain until the end of the event. It can really catch you out. I recommend a sports compound. However, because we did get lucky, it did allow me to really take advantage of the damp conditions and leave some much more powerful machinery absolutely standing still, as we blasted past the likes of AMGs and Audi R8s like they were nothing. Just be aware though, when you do get towards the front of the pack, it is typically a couple of Porsche. Now in terms of the cars themselves, of course they're great track cars around the Nordschleife, but they aren't very prepared. So just be aware that they may end up kicking out and may end up impeding you as you try and work your way through the pack. Honestly, these two up front can be absolute menaces in terms of overtaking them on such a tight layout like the Nordschleife in varying damp conditions. However, we did manage to eventually get the jump on both of them and make short work of them as we continued on all the way to the finish line. The intermediates definitely working well, as we did manage to get a power down much earlier than the Porsche and get the jump and get on all the way to the finish line. Again, it's definitely not needed in terms of the inters. Most of the times the sports compound will do, but in the end we did manage to pull out a 9.5 second lead. That is going to give us tick number 2 of the week. Now in terms of the payout for this one, it's really not too great. 64,000 credits for that event, and of course not getting the clean race bonus. I believe I did clip a car on the way through the pack. Event number 3 this week sees us head to Italy and Monza for the Hypercar Parade. Now this is an event that I've always took issue with. That is because the Hypercar Parade is very much too much like a parade itself. Honestly, it's really the easiest event of the week, as there's very little on-track action actually going on. My car of choice for this one was the Aston Martin Valkyrie. Of course, something pretty wacky and wild for this event. Now, my key issue when it comes to the Hypercar Parade, as mentioned, is that it is very much a parade, just showing off the most expensive and fanciest cars in Gran Turismo 7. However, the majority of the vehicles in the actual grid aren't necessarily actual hypercars. A lot of them kind of fall into the supercar category, sometimes even American muscle car category. There's very little in terms of legitimate hypercars on track. That means it's just a case of waiting for the fastest, most hypercarish vehicle to actually work its way to the front with very little on-track action. It also means that there's going to be a huge spread amongst the field as the slower cars kind of drop back and the faster cars work their way through, but also get held up along the way because GT7's AI is pretty notoriously terrible. Overall, it's just not the best experience, and honestly, I don't think anyone will have an issue here. So overall, yes, it's a pretty wild and varied grid, which is great in terms of the looks of the event, but overall the racing and on-track action is terrible. As you can see, over 5 laps we took nearly a minute long lead. That is going to be tick number 3 of the week. In terms of the payout for this one, 85,000 credits without that clean race bonus. So we are going to get our daily marathon, which unfortunately is a 3-star roulette ticket, but we're also going to get 3 ticks, which is 200,000 credits on top. So with that event done and dusted, let's move into something that actually provides on-track action. Of course, I'm talking about the Nissan GTR Cup, the new event for update 1.52 at Circuit de St. Croix A layout, one of the longest in the game. Of course, here for every single generation of Skyline GTR and Nissan GTR. Now, of course, my car of choice for this one would be the brand new T-Spec, of course, the 2024 model. Now, in terms of upgrades, I only went for a set of sports mediums, and that would literally be it. So this is the standard car, no extra power output or anything else, just a set of sports mediums to allow it to handle better overall, considering it is quite a bulky and weighty vehicle. Now, of course, it can be a little bit like the Hypercar Parade at first, where there is a mixed bag of vehicles. However, you will very quickly notice that a lot of even the older cars on the grid are pretty upgraded for this event. So overall, it does keep a nice mix amongst the pack, and you'll probably have some pretty great racing throughout. Overall, it's a pretty complex layout that goes from very open to very tight, so it's all about just picking off the AI one by one. In terms of the grid itself, there is a pretty big spread, which is something that does usually bug me, but I'd actually say when the event goes on for as long as this one does, it makes the racing much better, which we'll see a little bit later on. So we continue to work our way through the pack, the likes of R33 GTRs, R34s, 400R Nismos, some of the R35s which ran up front, and eventually would come up against our most toughest opponent, which was one of the premium edition GTR from 2017. This car would have a pretty major gap to the rest of the field, so of course it was running some fairly decent upgrades, and it would actually provide some of the best racing I think I've ever had with an AI in my entire 2,000 plus hours with Gran Turismo 7. As you can see, I had this almost lap long battle over the entirety of the 3-minute plus lap with this GTR. It was just constant. I'd overtake them, they'd overtake me, they'd then hold the line so I couldn't get through, they'd defend. It was absolutely fantastic. Some of the best hands down racing I've ever had in any game mode and in any Gran Turismo game. As you can see, it was constantly going on. We would have the legs on the straight, but they definitely had the better brakes and probably some weight reduction too, as they seemed to get their speed down much better than we could with zero weight reduction. As you can see, it was constant side-by-side action. We were trying to get the run out here, very equally matched. Then the top end kicked in on the 2024 model. We'd hit the brakes and we'd try and get the cutback, and eventually it would pull off. Now, as you can see, we're still side by side as we're about to go for the bridge. So once again, I'm trying to get that cutback on the GTR, and this time it really would pay off as we managed to accelerate up over the bump and across the bridge, managing to secure that first place. As you can see, in the end, only half a second would be the gap as we cross the line and eventually take that win. Absolutely a fantastic event, a great bit of on-track action there. That is tick number 4 for the week. In terms of the payout, not too bad either, 141k, of course, with that 50% clean race bonus, which is quite easy to get for this one. And that is going to bring us into the special event for this week. Of course, event number 5 sees the introduction of DTM to Gran Turismo 7 in the form of a special event, very much like the JGTC ones we've recently seen in recent months. So very much in the same style, but of course DTM themed, which means we have a nice mixture of race and road cars. So once again, a 10 lap event, this time 19 cars on the grid. Main rival cars, the likes of the M3s, Alpha 155s. We have the likes of no penalties, no mechanical damage, and no tuning or BOP prohibition on the cars. Now, in terms of the event itself, I had to go for the Alpha 155 DTM. This is one of my favourite cars in the entirety of GT7. Of course, it's missing its partner, the Opel Calibra DTM. Hopefully that car does eventually make a return. So there's 18 AIs on grid, 19 cars total, including yourself, over a 10-lap sprint race. Now, of course, the reason the tyre life and the fuel usage is off is because it's a mixture of road cars turned into sort of race cars and race cars themselves. So it would be very, very unfair if that was turned on. Very much like we see with the JGTC event, but of course a lot less in terms of the varieties. The main kind of cars that you're going to have rival battles with here are probably going to be the Alphas. They do seem to stand out amongst the, roster of vehicles on show here. One thing I did start taking notice of very early on in the event was actually the fact that the grid really spreads out here. You'll actually end up with a massive spread amongst the field by the time you get towards the front of it. By the end of 10 laps, I did actually start seeing some of the back markers in the distance, which means we were almost lapping them. Now, in terms of the cars themselves, the likes of the, Sierra Cosworths, the Mercedes, and of course the BMWs, those being road cars, you shouldn't have too much of an issue getting through them. Whilst they are, of course, very much highly tuned and not anywhere near standard, very much turned into race cars, they don't have the advantage of the four-wheel drive system like the Alpha 155. So you'll probably have the majority of your battles right towards the front of the pack. As you can see, the gap absolutely massive across the field with cars in their own like kind of different groupings. Eventually we would end up in a side-by-side battle once again, this time with another Alpha 155 as we started on lap 8, but eventually we would get that move done and dusted, and that did allow us to sort of stretch our legs out and really kind of pull out a decent lead. In the end we pulled out over 7 seconds in terms of the gap at the end of 10 laps. Overall, that is going to be tick number 5 for the week, and the entire weekly challenges done and dusted. Unfortunately, we didn't get the clean race bonus. It was 150k as per usual, but of course 500k on top of that. So let's move over to the rewards for this week. For our daily driving marathon, we've got a 3-star ticket. This is the worst ticket I can possibly get at the maximum collector level. You won't get anything below a 3-star ticket. And of course, it's going to give me an absolutely terrible reward of 5,000 credits. So really mind-blowing, that one. So of course the next bunch of rewards are going to be monetary only. So for one event it was 100,000 credits, so we're going to add that to the account. For 3 events it's 200,000 credits, once again adding it to the account. And finally for all 5 it's 500,000 credits to finish us off for the week. And there we go, that is going to be the entire set of weekly challenges for October week 1. It's great to see DTM finally enter Gran Turismo 7. Hopefully this does provide some clues that we'll see the likes of the Opel Calibra DTM eventually return, and maybe even some more of the modern machinery like the Audi RS5. Big thank you to all of my channel members. If you do want to become one today, it really does help me out between uploads. And a big thank you to you guys watching at home. I hope you have a fantastic start to your weekend. I'll see you later on, guys. Take care. Peace.